This is CRM Audio, the Microsoft Dynamics CRM podcast, with George Dubinsky, Joel Lindstrom, and Sean, the CRM Hobbit Tabor. So this episode will come out on the day before Halloween. So what costume are you gentlemen wearing?
Well, my normal God-given suit is that of a hobbit. I don't know, probably maybe I would love to get a set of Jedi robes like Matt Anderson. I'm still very jealous about that.
And George, you're normally scary looking enough, so do you wear
Yeah, I was going to say that I don't need to wear anything, so I'm just go as myself. Which is scary enough for most people.
Go again as Bond villain. That'd be good.
Actually, yeah, my daughter said something to me today when they were doing some school. There was a European school tour. Like for a couple of weeks, they went to Europe. It's a ancient history study tour, whatever. And they said that they were doing some reconstruction at Pompeii's or whatever, Pompeii, like village reconstruction, Vesuvius, all this sort of stuff. And she said when they've done reconstruction, she was fairly impressed because the guy they reconstructed looked exactly like me. So.
Right. So the guy who got killed by the molten lava looked just like you.
Yeah. So there you go.
So you took that to mean classic good looks, right?
That's right.
All right, Newshound Tabor, what you got for us?
We got three stories in the hopper today. One, we want to talk about the knowledge management for 2016, CRM 2016 release. A lot of neat features in here. If you remember, the knowledge management we've come to know and love to this point has a lot of good features, but there's some limitations in terms of authoring, versioning, and such. With 2016, we're getting some really cool features. We're going to get rich content authoring, so you could actually have HTML code when you're creating the articles. You can embed images and videos. This is huge, in my opinion. I've had several implementations when we've used knowledge management where they wanted to not only embed images but update them as the product evolves, and it's quite a cumbersome task. Versioning, so you can understand where you're at in that process, which version is which of the article. And also translation, as companies are getting more global and in their reach, translation is important. And with 2016, they're going to support up to roughly 164 languages, and it'll maintain a link among all the translations of an article. So CRM really, it's something important to keep in mind. CRM really just marks the article for translation, so the article can be translated. It doesn't out of the box translate it for you, but it's a good step in the right direction. There's also some dashboards that you could use to understand metrics and KPIs on your knowledge management. And then there's also a life cycle and article review business process flow. There's some other features, but really the steps they're taking in 2016 is a really positive step in my opinion, and really is going to get a lot more benefit out of that functionality for CRM users. Next up, we have a preview of the data loader service for online. With data migration, you're having to write custom code or use third-party tools to get large volumes of data. The Dynamics team has now given us a data loader service for CRM Online that's going to allow you to move the data between flat files and online, cutting down on that implementation cost. This is a great new feature. Now, it is a preview, and right now it's a preview available to North American-based Dynamics CRM Online organizations. Sorry, George. And it does support Online Update 1 and upcoming release. And lastly, in the news segment, we have yet a follow-up to the reorg of the Dynamics CRM teams. Several episodes ago, we talked about the tweaking of the Cloud and Enterprise Business Unit over at Microsoft, and it's gone a little bit further. The business apps team within that group is where CRM and ERP businesses are going to sit. And as part of the reorg earlier, the CRM and ERP engineering teams moved into Cloud and Enterprise Unit. It's still going to be led by Bob Stutz, and the new Business Applications Platform and Intelligence team are going to be running just as strong as they did before. But what this is continuing to do is it's bringing together and integrating more tightly the SQL Server, System Center, and Dynamics CRM and ERP teams within the cloud organization, which I think is just nothing but positive for the product going forward. And that's our news items for today.
Great. So
let's discuss.
Let's discuss them. Yes. Okay. So the first one I think was knowledge management. Knowledge management is something that I'm getting pretty excited about. Some things interesting things. You are not going to have to like Parature to use knowledge management. A lot of people are expecting, that's a Parature feature. But if you read the blog post, they don't mention Parature anywhere. And my understanding is it's not really Parature. It's loosely based on the functionality, but there's basically a integrated hub where you can see the dashboards, and people who author your knowledge base articles can do that. And it's all exposed through CRM. No need to set up the Parature portal and all that is not required. So to me, that opens the door where a lot of online customers will start using knowledge management, which is a good thing.
And it's a really powerful tool if implemented well within your service organization to really get a lot of good information to your customers, as well as provide a lot of good information to your service workers, so that they can get information that they may not access on a daily basis very quickly and easily through keyword searches and contact searches.
Right. And in my opinion, the biggest work that somebody who has CRM online now that wants to start using knowledge management needs to do isn't so much focused around the tooling and the functionality, but the whole process of where do we start with knowledge management and how do we build these articles if we don't have any. How do we select the appropriate levels we use, all that kind of stuff? That to me is where the most work is for somebody who doesn't have it. And actually, when this episode posts, yesterday's tip of the day is one that I wrote. Well, I kind of was the librarian on it and asked a bunch of smart people what their thoughts on the topic were, and I got some good feedback from them. Mitch Milam said, you look for questions, common questions you get, and start building articles there. Shan MacArthur, who has done a lot with knowledge management because Parature and other knowledge management are integrated with ADX Portal right now, and his recommendation was a lot of people over-engineer it. A lot of people try and every single question and build it out. His recommendation is start thin and light. And if it's a burden, your articles won't be written well, and you'll have a poor knowledge base. Keep it sparse, keep it agile, and as feedback comes in, add posts driven by demand, which I thought was a good suggestion.
And that's important to keep in mind, especially for maintainability, because you can really create a whiz-bang knowledge management infrastructure, to your point, but if it is so complex and so many articles, the organization and the ability to maintain those consistently with the most up-to-date information becomes cumbersome, and then your knowledge management infrastructure becomes more of a problem than a solution itself.
Right. The skill set you need is more of a librarian than a CRM configurator. You know, it's kind of related to, I see it similar to the SharePoint document library skill set, where people who know how to group and categorize and come up with metadata tags and things like that, those are the skill sets you need on your team or with the partner you work with. And one suggestion, Adam Hong from Microsoft, who has spoken on this topic at Convergence and other conferences, clients that he views as most effective have a team that's dedicated for things like keeping up with when articles expire and for making sure there's a good review process and making sure that things get categorized effectively. Where this falls apart is you don't have those people. And so things expire, it's uneven cadence when things get published, and things aren't tagged effectively, so you can't find them.
Is one new feature that's going to help that is the life cycle and article review business process flows. Being able to customize that to your organization, notify the right people at the right times, even if it's a very small team or individuals within multiple teams that handle siloed articles, for example. That's I think going to be a big benefit to helping maintain that. It's not the end-all solution by all means, but I think it'll help a great deal.
So generally I'm very excited. A couple of things that I think are going to be a little bit, put it strained right now, is the insert knowledge base article link in the Outlook client is not going to at this time point to these knowledge base articles. So that's going to be a little bit strange, especially because there's no supported way to take that out. And also, if you look at the screenshots in the blog post from Bob Stutz on the CRM team blog, the UI in that is a little bit different than CRM. Now, if you have a dedicated team who only works there, I think it's going to be okay. But it's kind of a mishmash. You've got a little bit of the mobile UI in there. You've got a little bit of kind of Parature-ish UI in there. Mm-hmm. We're kind of in a weird mishmash of UIs. I think it's going. We can tell where it's going, but right now, that's one thing that I find a little bit different right now that might be a little bit hard to deal with sometimes. But on the whole, I love to see this rich functionality coming in. And from it looks like it, the text editor is going to be a very rich text editor. I'm hoping that comes into CRM. I would really love to see notes fields and other things like that. Text fields have that same rich capability.
I've had several implementations where that's been a request, and unfortunately we couldn't fulfill it. So, yeah, I agree.
I was mostly listening because last week I spent working closely with Parature team, or some people from Parature team, delivering some training. Parature and Unified. I was covering Unified Service Desk. From what I know, indeed, that is partial reuse of Parature IP, I would say, to deliver this functionality. So it's you're right in the sense that it doesn't come from Parature, but I believe the large portions of Parature knowledge of the subject is used to deliver this functionality. So surprisingly, I came last week to meet Parature guys with a bit of negative feelings, mostly because I couldn't get Parature organization provision for months, and now I had the chance to play with it, and I have to say that I was fairly impressed with the certain capabilities of Parature. Not all of it, but KB was one of them. The other chat and multilingual capabilities, those were probably the highlights for me in terms of what CRM can definitely take out of Parature and reuse. And this is the first one of the blocks, reusing this functionality. And I believe it's been re-implemented, so it's definitely, it's no longer on the Parature platform, so you don't need a separate Parature instance or anything like that. They're taking the best bits and they deliver good functionality. I kind of disagree with your notion that, give me the rich content authoring inside CRM notes. That's what OneNote is for. I don't believe that it should be done in CRM, primarily for the purpose that CRM has no idea how to search rich content.
Okay.
So I kind of disagree that these capabilities should be inside CRM. It just doesn't belong there. By the same token, like storing images in CRM doesn't make sense because it's hard to classify them. It belongs to a record, so it doesn't exist outside of the record. By that token, I believe that storing content, rich content outside CRM, like in OneNote, makes much more sense.
I hear your points, George. My customers want it, so you're wrong.
and so do mine. So it's 2-on-1.
There's got to be a middle ground, though, between only plain text I mean, even things like word wrapping and things like that to make it a little bit more modern than just the text.
I've got a solution for you. Markdown. So you can use Markdown, like bold, italic, all this sort of stuff. Typable, completely, it's pure text. So works great. People love it. Developers love it. Let me correct that. Developers love it. So.
Second topic was the data loader preview.
Yes.
Looking at this and reading the article about it and what I know about it, it seems to me like the import utility on steroids, because it's all load and it's all from flat files. And the other thing is it has the same limitations as some of the entities that can't be loaded. For example, if you want to add marketing list members, or if you want to add activity parties and things like that, you can't do it through there. So, and I get it's a preview. I'm hoping, and I'm sure that it'll get much better. To me, this does solve a need, but only part of a need. It's great that you can load. Let's say it can load 1 million records an hour. Not trying it. Not tried it yet. Don't know if it will or not. But let's say it did. That solves the need for some migrations. But again, you're not going. I don't see that you'll be able to do an entire CRM migration. So you're coming from Salesforce into CRM. If you can't get every entity, if you can't get the activity parties and things like that, I don't see it solving that need completely. Also, the bigger pain, in my opinion, is large ongoing automated integrations, because that's where you got the need to have on a daily basis. If it's a one time, like at the beginning of the process, if it takes me 3-4 days to load your data, it's painful, but it doesn't cause an ongoing issue. Whereas if you have to update or load 200,000 records a day, that's where I think, to me, the bigger. So if I could connect to this with something like Kingsway Soft or something, then I'd be really excited. I'm excited to see it coming, but my enthusiasm is a bit muted because of, it's all flat files. I mean, working with million record flat files is not a fun experience, from my experience.
I don't have a lot of experience doing it, but in the limited experience that I have, no, it is not fun.
But I think it's better than the import utility. Reading the articles, I think there's more data validation and things like that. And again, I think as a proof of concept, showing how it's quicker to load data from Azure, lesson learned for your integration, move your integration to Azure.
Well, incidentally, you can have a look at where it's available, and the domain name is lcs.dynamics.com, which is Lifecycle Services. So it is part of Lifecycle Services. One of the interesting bits that I wonder what they've done there is, I'm reading, imports historical data like closed activities. So what do you reckon they've done there?
I was reading something about that, and it has to do with the state of the records, and I'm not 100% sure, but it's something about how you can import records in, and it recognizes the state. I think to contrast the import utility, I believe it only can import things as open records.
Yeah, but this one looks like it does recognize the state. So that's quite interesting. I wonder if it solves the problem with something like importing opportunities where your close date is always going to be today.
Could be that would be a positive thing. But every migration I've done, it's a multi-step process, and you've got to bring in the accounts and bring in the contacts, update the accounts to primary contact, got to bring the activities, then bring the attachments in, then go back and update the activities. And so if you're bringing in just activities with maybe only the regarding object, regarding company or something like that could feasibly be done.
Again, I'm a bit confused by the statements like on one hand you said, we've got high throughput on the flat files, right, even with the dependencies, which is great. But then you have something like Excel app for fixing invalid data in the staging DB and iterate over the data. And I'm thinking to myself, 1 million rows, have fun with Excel app over 1 million rows. So it's kind of a bit contradictory. On one hand, you want a manageable set of data, that you can edit in Excel and fix in Excel. On the other hand, you aiming for enterprise scale, multi-million rows tool. And these two just don't gel together in my books. Plus, It's not America only, so I don't really care about it.
It's dead.
The third story was about the group further information on the group reorg.
Further information. So
right. So we were talking about how the group we already talked about in the past how they moved to the cloud and enterprise team. How in this new edition the ERP and CRM teams are in the business apps team, still led up by Bob Stutz. It was kind of just an update of the information we had before, but now there's more information in the surrounding organizations, SQL Server, System Center, that sort of thing.
Well, to me, I think that the fact that devs were moving to onto cloud and enterprise, that's been known for quite some time. What wasn't clear where kind of the rest of CRM team or the business part of CRM team is moving. Now that it's a bit clearer, then I believe it's actually a great move. And I said it before that it's a great move. One of the reasons, coming even from developers' point of view, is that looking at the agenda of Microsoft Ignite conference, which is like reincarnation of a tech ed, Dynamics CRM is back in business. Like we've been dropped off the agenda for a number of years. And now we're kind of back. It's a keyword, it's a keyword on agenda, which is good. We're finally getting some recognition and getting some traction, and maybe finally people will stop building CRM in SharePoint.
That would be good.
That would be very good.
I have no further thoughts on the further information about the CRM team consolidation.
No, not really.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. I think
it's good stuff. Yeah.
All right. So before we bring on our special guest this morning, there were a couple of posts on the Tip of the Day site in the last week that got more feedback than normal. And just want to talk through a couple of them. The one was written by myself, Tip 501, and the feedback was generally against my opinions on it. So I just wanted to see what your thoughts. And it was question, should you use the lead entity? And in the post I made the point that there are some issues with the lead entity, or more how people generally use it, such as they keep things in the lead entity way too long, which leads to, due to either practices or data quality, leads to a bunch of duplicates. So like I keep my leads there, I work them a long time, not knowing there's already a contact for them, then I convert over, some of that information doesn't move over, and also they disqualify lead because somebody says they're not interested in buying, then 6 months later, the person calls back and they create a new lead form and they don't know that they don't have the old information. So my recommendation was, as a salesperson 10 years ago, I was a salesperson for about a decade, and we had a CRM system. This is before Dynamics CRM. We had a system that had leads separate from accounts, and I can tell you from my experience that salespeople are not great at focusing on two different things. So if they have a bucket of leads and they have a bucket of accounts and contacts, they're going to pay attention to one or the other. If you have people who are dedicated, like inside salespeople who are dedicated to only qualifying leads can be very effective. And I think 2013 leads took a step backwards too, because you don't give it as many choices when you qualify them. When you qualify a lead, if you don't fill out the contact field, it will create a new contact for you. It always creates an opportunity. And while that may be the ideal sales process, that doesn't match the real world. So my recommendation was, if that describes you, use accounts and contacts and put a classification lead in the relationship type. A lot of people disagreed with that. So George, I believe you tweeted out that we needed to have a mano-a-mano conversation about this. So now's your chance. Where was I off base in that?
No, you were not completely on base. I mean, I'm more disappointed than you. We had this comment, which more looks like advertisement, and we agreed to try and milk this lady for some sponsorship money, and you just let this comment in without without extracting any positive financial value out of it. So I'm more upset on that one. But anyway,
he calls
this
himself
is
a producer.
Yeah. This aside, remind me to remove his publishing rights on the site. So.
So yeah, I mean, I get the points that a lot of people see lead in CRM, they think, oh, we need to use that for leads. That's not the case. And
look, I totally agree with you that leads. The biggest problem with using leads that you sooner or later you end up with an entity which is a stinking pile of rubbish with 5,000-7,000 dead, absolutely dead records sitting in there. But and in majority of cases, people can just skip that and go straight to contacts. But there are some valid cases, and some of them were listed.
Right.
When you should use leads. I believe you still missed one case.
Okay.
And that's kind of obvious. It became obvious when we were working with the customer in the medical field, where their customers, they need to be pre-qualified, and not in the sense that are you going to purchase or not, but in terms of suitability. Can you potentially be a customer or not, right? In that terms, and that's like purely its qualification on medical grounds. Are you suitable for this type of surgery or not? If
Right.
you're not, you will never be a customer.
Right.
That's the bottom line. So there was a specific qualification process, that eligibility process for people to become a customer, and there is no point in moving them to become a customer because they will never be. They will, under no circumstances, they can be a customer if they disqualify. Like, for example, you must have a blood type A+ or whatever the blood type is, right? And if you don't, then you will never be a customer. End of story.
Because you can't change your blood type.
Correct. Yes. So you can't do anything about it. So these kind of systems where there is some pre-qualification process that qualifies people to be customers, and that is on the range of some not subjective but objective measurements, like those that outside of people's control and those that you can't change and those that will disqualify customer like forever and ever, right? In those instances, leads make total sense. In some instances also leads make sense when basically a contact entity is overloaded with multiple types of contacts.
Right.
Not necessarily all of them customers, and you've probably seen systems like that. In those instances, leads kind of make a bit more sense to provide some staging environment before bringing them in. And classifying as a customer, so this type of customer or that type of customer. But generally, I agree. Even when using lead entity, we ended up doing what you suggested, like writing special plugins, transferring all the contact history, communication history from lead to contact. Even now, the problem I'm experiencing is that every time they ask for an additional piece of information or field for the customer, inevitably they end up asking for the same field in leads. So it's like a parallel development. It's deja vu. It's like parallel development all over the place.
And if you read the comments, it's leads can work great. You just got to write this plugin or do this thing and jump through all these hoops to make it work. And my thought is, if that's the case, why not use it? The best excuse I've seen for using leads is where you got the web form where you get a bunch of junk entries where people fill out Santa Claus or Mickey Mouse or something like that. Then you got to keep that crap out of your contacts and accounts. But for people, especially business to business type scenarios where you're not getting a flood of people added every day, just go with the accounts and contacts. The other one I wanted to mention was tip 500. We hinted at this last week, but that was Captain Redlace Scott Sewell's mobile manifesto. That thing got tweeted a bunch of times, and it's been good. If you haven't got a chance, read that, because he links to a bunch of Connect items, and we want to make sure those get voted up as much as possible. We've already seen from kind of the feedback we've been giving Microsoft about some of these gaps in the mobile apps, we've seen some real movement on some of these things being fixed in 2016 or being put in the roadmap at least. So I would encourage everybody, if you haven't, go to crmtipoftheday.com, look at tip 500, and look at all the hyperlinks in there. And if you're not on Connect, register for connect.microsoft.com. That's currently Microsoft's feedback site. The more votes we get on this stuff, the more priority it will be given from the product team.
And I saw that document slowly build from its beginnings, and it was quite an interesting process seeing that come to fruition. And if you haven't read it already, I encourage it. Like Joel just said, everybody, you should read it and upvote those Connect items, because there's a lot of good stuff in there.
And Scott is basically living out in a cabin in the woods, mumbling CRM mobile, CRM mobile. CRM mobile now.
Rocking back and forth in the fetal position. Yes.
Well, let's bring on our special guest. Our guest this week is Michael Quattlebaum. Impossible name to spell, but great guy. And Michael is a consulting principal at Hitachi Solutions. Michael, at our customer conference, gave a presentation about how to calculate and how to figure the return on investment from your CRM system. I thought it was went a little bit deeper than anything I've ever seen on the topic. It's something that a lot of times people ask for, but it's sometimes difficult to put your finger on what is that ROI. So welcome, Michael.
Thanks, Joel. I appreciate you guys having me, and looking forward to sharing just a little bit about what we did at customer conference and some of the customer success around that. In an ROI model, there are really just two major components, and that is, what is the initial investment in CRM, or really any technology, but CRM in particular in this case, and then what is the ongoing benefit associated with that. So I try to narrow down with the client some of the major areas of benefit and of cost so that we can start putting together the formula for an ROI. And there's two ways to do an ROI. Of course, as people are wanting to invest in CRM early in the stage or in the process, they want to understand what the potential ROI is, and then also looking backwards at their initial investment, their initial ROI, to justify further investment and further justification for expansion of a CRM implementation. So if you look at the benefit side of the equation, there are really 5 major areas that I usually encourage people to look at. Improved productivity is one of those. That's kind of a soft cost, so it's kind of hard to put hard dollar values associated with improved productivity, but you can do that. Enhanced customer service and client retention. So usually you can assign an expected amount of number of clients that stay on longer because of better service and those sorts of things, so you can put dollar values associated with that. And that usually involves looking at what is the cost to acquire a new customer and ramp up a new customer and those sorts of things. So that's part of the equation on the benefits side. And then increase opportunity close rate. So typically with a CRM implementation, if you get good at tracking opportunities, you improve the number of opportunities that you follow through with and you're able to close, so you can assign dollar value to that. But the one that I focused on primarily in the use case for our customer conference was improved cross-sell and upsell opportunities. This is an area that you can put really hard dollars with and very clear ROI calculations. And then the last one is software cost savings. So those are the benefit side of the equation. On the cost side, of course, you've got infrastructure costs, ongoing IT maintenance, the professional services with the implementation itself, license costs for CRM or any other integration pieces, that sort of thing, and then the deployment or training costs. So those are the benefits and the cost pieces of the equation that I try and dig into with the customer, and identifying some specific areas where we can assign dollar values to those with the client. You don't have to have all of those. Certainly all of those are part of an equation for any business, but identifying just a handful of those where you can put numbers to them is really where I encourage a client to focus. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So since you focused on the cross-sale opportunities, so you were talking about a company like an enterprise company that had different divisions or different sales and different products.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So the specific use case I presented at the customer conference was around a credit union. So a credit union has, of course, a standard share account, which is a checking account. So the standard account that somebody usually starts with a bank or credit union is opening that checking account. However, an organization like a bank has lots of other products to offer a potential or an existing customer, things like savings accounts, CDs. For a credit union, it's things like insurance, and even Lake Michigan Credit Union, which is the client we're talking about here, even has a used car organization, so they can sell people cars as well. So looking for all of those opportunities to upsell or invest in other products with the organization is what we're looking at there.
How did you quantify what the benefit would be for having the ability to do additional cross-selling?
So great question. So in this particular case, we had a feel for what the number of referrals or cross-sell opportunities were within the organization. So we knew a specific number of referrals, and not only that, but we were able to eventually come up with what were the successful referrals. And so by doing so, by evaluating that before CRM and then looking at the use of CRM over one calendar year, we were able to evaluate the improvement in close rate and in improved number of cross-sell opportunities. So we could assign specific dollar amounts to that. And the way we did that was we looked at successful referrals before CRM, successful referrals after CRM, and then the improved number of those. And then we broke it down ultimately to profitability by product type, and we knew the number of new referrals made by product type to assign the hard dollar value to it.
Right. So you're going back after the fact, like was a year or two after implementing CRM and looking at what were the real numbers then?
Yeah, so their purpose in this evaluation was to say, how much did we invest in CRM? What's the hard dollar value benefit that we gained over the last year with CRM? And then looking at future opportunities to expand their investment. So that was the purpose in this case. We can take those same numbers, though, and apply them to similar businesses and say, from a ballpark perspective, this is what you can expect, and then evaluate what those numbers look like with a business that hasn't implemented CRM yet.
Right. I think from the productivity side of things, I've found certain clients it's a lot easier to calculate that than others. I think if you got a defined process like a call center or like a bank teller, that's something
Right.
you can do time studies around and say, okay, how long does it take you to process the call? Whereas somebody like an outside sales rep or something like that, that's a much mushier number to calculate.
That's exactly right. So productivity savings, that's one of those soft numbers for most people, right? It's yeah, I can call on 15 more people in a given week than I could before CRM because of better routing or those sorts of things. So if I can call on 15 more people in a week than I could before CRM, then therefore I can apply a close ratio to those 15 new visits. Therefore, I can turn that into X dollars in sales. So that's usually how sales productivity is calculated.
Or for some employees, if you make their process shorter, they'll just use that time to play Candy Crush or something.
The idea is if I give you more time, you're going to actually use that to sell something else.
Right. So what do you find when calculating ROI for on-premise versus online? I think the online calculation is easier because you've got more of a known cost, where for on-premise there's a lot of costs around all the different licensing for Windows, SQL Server, etc. Have sometimes different cycles they go through. Like sometimes you implement CRM, they're already got the licenses, so the cost might come later. For on-premise, it's a little bit more challenging to come up with a true cost basis sometimes.
Right. No, I agree with that, Joel. The people typically forget things like, oh, I have to invest in a server or a virtual machine or the licenses associated with those. I have to also remember that I have maintenance costs in terms of people cost associated with on-premise, and a lot of times people forget those numbers as well. So the numbers can mount up pretty quickly with an on-premise versus a cloud implementation. One thing to remember, though, with cloud implementations is sometimes you have more infrastructure costs with integrations with cloud versus on-premise. So you have to remember that as well when you're calculating the overall cost.
Sean or George, you got any questions?
I'm sorry, I was playing Candy Crush. So.
Oh, now we're talking about actually putting dollar value to CRM, so that's boring. Let's talk about the technical stuff. Is that right?
No, I was wondering if in return on investment you cover things like where would have spent money if it wasn't for CRM. For example, if you went with Salesforce as you planned originally, you would have spent $7 million more than you have spent now with CRM and achieved probably the same result. Can you actually quantify indirect savings like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I haven't really done one in terms of comparing competitive costs unless that competitor is the incumbent. So if I'm replacing Salesforce, it's absolutely part of the equation. But the same thing can be said if I'm replacing a homegrown solution that's out there, right? If I've spent X dollars maintaining that homegrown solution over X number of years, then I can extrapolate what the cost would be going forward, and I absolutely make that part of the equation. So any kind of hard costs that are well defined in terms of software replacement, that's also part of the cost equation.
And interestingly, yeah, Joel was right mentioning something that I digged into it a bit about call centers and metrics in the call centers, where it's more or less clear. I suspect it's not that in call centers it's clearer, the metrics are better, let me rephrase that. So it's not that call centers are better suited for applying metrics. It's just historically due to a volume of interactions, people applied metrics from day one in call centers. So there's something like time to resolution, average call waiting time, things like that. The metrics, there is a number of metrics that people use to quantify savings in the call center. And in the call centers, shaving like 10 seconds of the average call literally can save millions of dollars.
That's exactly right. The multiples work really well in call centers. So that's
correct. Yeah, but I wonder if in the sales cycle we're just behind in creating those metrics. Not that they don't exist, but until now there was no any direct or immediate need to create those metrics. And moving forward, hopefully we will create a set of metrics, would it be a sales process or customer service process or let's say marketing process, where you can create metrics that are on par with the metrics that we currently can use for the call centers.
Yeah, I think you're right on target there, and I'll give you an example with the use case that we talked about. The statistics that I needed to calculate the successful referrals, when I calculated those in CRM, we had those in about 10 minutes. Literally, it took us 10 minutes to do those calculations and to get the metrics that we needed. For us to get the prior year before CRM from the existing systems and the data that they had, it took us 4.5 weeks to get that information. So the data might have been there to get the metrics that we needed, but the method for getting them was not available, and the data wasn't easily accessible, and tying multiple systems together in order to calculate those numbers was just crazy. And just that alone, of course, has value to the organization, and it just goes to your point that the process of calculating those metrics on the sales side just isn't there for most organizations.
So do you use those kind of calculations forward thinking when you work with a customer saying we need to develop these processes, and maybe they're hesitant to do so because they don't have resources, they don't have experience, what have you?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Sean, a lot of times when I'm going into a client, I use these past experiences like this specific use case to say, investing X dollars in a CRM implementation seems like a lot, but let me show you the cost of not doing it, which
right.
is the ROI calculation, right? So right. I can use specific examples. I'm going into another credit union next week where I'm going to use the use case that we presented at the customer conference to say, how can you not invest in CRM?
George, I was reminded when you were talking about the about incorporating things like competitors like Salesforce and the cost of them. One of the early tips of the day you did was a kind of a hand-drawn back of the napkin kind of thing about the timeline of the cost structure with Salesforce. That was.
It was early beginning. Yeah, if you search for Salesforce, I think you'll find it. Just give me a second, I'll find it. But I was wondering, with the return on investment, how bringing developers skews the numbers, because every time someone says, "Oh, we need 2 or 3 developers, and then we can really nail our CRM," and my answer is always, I hope you realize what you're getting yourself into, right? So I wonder if, like building CRM system is one thing. I understand that, Michael, that sometimes you after the whole system, but I wonder if you can build system with developers or without developers, or rather with development and without custom development, how they compare.
Yes, so great question. So let's look at some specific costs. So the CRM license and server costs, all the infrastructure piece is a piece of that. But you do have ongoing support and personnel around that. In the use case that we presented, they actually have 0 people that are 100% dedicated to CRM. They do have 6 people who are trained in CRM and support, and 3 of those are developer types, but they don't devote 100% of their time to CRM. So if we look at the overall full-time equivalents, FTEs, for supporting CRM, those become part of the equation when we calculate the ROI. So in the case here, we've got 1.5 to 2 FTEs, even though there's 6 people, when you calculate the percentage of their dedication to CRM and that sort of thing, you apply their actual salary plus benefits as part of the equation, and that goes into the investment cost in the ROI calculation. And even with that, so in this case we've got some developers and that sort of thing, even with that, we've got ROIs that are still well in the 75-80% ROI calculation as part of the outcome from that. So in the use case that I presented, the 3-year ROI for their CRM investment was actually 157%. So great ROI and not uncommon. And that's just using a few of the metrics that are around the ROI that we felt like we could assign hard dollar values to. We've seen outcomes anywhere from 50% 3-year ROI to 300% ROI. So it really depends on the areas of implementation and whether or not you can assign hard dollar values. Now remember, Joel, in this case, I just used cross-selling as the metric. There were performance efficiencies and those sorts of things that did not weigh into the equation that could have. The reality proves out that that's usually the case, as long as you have a solid implementation that includes more than just, I'm throwing my contacts in there.
Right, as long as you've got if your company implementing CRM has good practices and really wants it to succeed too.
Sure, absolutely.
Dedicates the resources needed to make it happen, for sure. Well, Michael, appreciate you coming on this week. What's the best way to get in touch with you? Are you on Twitter or anything like that?
I am on Twitter. It's Michael EQ on Twitter, MichaelEQ on Twitter. Email is also fine. It's a little more complex because it's mquattlebaum at hitachi-solutions.com. But either of those are perfectly fine to reach out to me.
Did someone already take QBomb on Twitter? You didn't go over that one?
I didn't. I'm Michael EQ on just about everything, so I just went with that.
Tip number 41, and I take offense to your statement that it's on the back of a napkin, because that was one of my early attempts to use Surface as a drawing tool.
In my memory, it was the back of a napkin. So it was a very big napkin.
Yeah, it was. It demonstrates that it's not about the tool; it's about skills of the person. I obviously lack those in the drawing department. But
we've now got so many tips that the tip link doesn't display them all.
No, Salesforce, we've got only 7 hits if you search on a Salesforce. Okay. So that's right on top. So it's tip 41, comparative pricing, and I think it still stands the way Salesforce does the pricing. So.
All right. One of the other blog series that I've done recently on the Hitachi blog is documenting my experiences living in what I call the post-Outlook client era. You wanting to know what it's really like in your day-to-day work to not use the Outlook client and still try and track stuff and things like that. I wrote 3 blog posts about it. One kind of an introduction to kind of the why. I've realized this for a year or two. For people who are mobile or traveling a good amount of the time, the Outlook client is not best fit for them. It still has a lot of rich functionality if you're sitting in the office using the same computer all the time, but if you're on your phone a lot, things like that, it's not necessarily the best fit, because I find that there's a good chunk of time where I'm not tracking anything and saying, I got to remember to do it when I get back. So then the second post, I documented kind of like the 2 options, the alternatives, such as the Outlook app preview and the folder level tracking. Currently, the folder level tracking is more useful to me because I like to be able to track in bulk, like sit down and track 20 emails from Sean or whatever. Where the Outlook preview, 2 things. It currently, you can only track one at a time, and also it's not available on mobile yet. So that makes that. When it does become available on mobile, I believe 2016 general availability will make it work on the Outlook app. When that happens, the use case of being able to track something when I send it, or being able to track and do more, like hit the Dynamics CRM link and actually like create a case or create another record or create a contact that isn't there, I think that's going to have a very solid use case. But then there are a few things I miss. And the things I miss are some of the richer functionality, such as being able to track things when I send them, such as being able to track appointments. The new options don't really give you the ability to track an appointment or really track a contact either. And I have had times where I've missed that. But all in all, I've found that you really can survive without the Outlook client, especially if you're kind of a mobile professional.
I really like the ability to move away from the Outlook client. I've always had a mixed experience with it. There's a lot of really good functionality, but the ability to use the tracking in the folders like you've talked about is, to me, in my experience, really invaluable, because when I'm in CRM, I like being in the web, and I keep forgetting to go back to Outlook. That's just a personal thing of mine. So I really like the folder tracking. It seems a lot more intuitive to me.
Right, and I want to be sure I don't trash the Outlook client, because the Outlook client, in my opinion, was one of the revolutionary things that drove CRM's success. And
absolutely.
There's a lot of great capabilities in the Outlook client, and if you install the Outlook client in a clean room scenario where it's the only add-in, your experience is great. From my experience,
Yes.
Like if I set up a demo on a VM, it works fantastic. Add-in structure, by its nature, it has a lot of variables out in the wild where there's so many other Outlook add-ins and so much potential for conflicts. It leads to, in many cases, in the real world, a less than optimal experience. And also, just because people don't use Outlook on the PC, that's the biggest change that makes it not optimal for a good chunk of users.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it has a ton of great functionality, and I agree. When I was before I was in consulting and I was a customer, Outlook was the big thing that got us to first even consider Dynamics CRM, because it was all integrated. So, but with my specific usage patterns, the folder synchronization is just a better experience for me.
Well, George, you got a tool of the week?
Absolutely. The tool of the week is related to something that you guys probably know nothing about, and that is source control systems. I'm not sure how you guys run your stuff, but we run everything in one of the distributed version control systems. Would it be Git? The best one is GitHub, or Mercurial, which is the most widely known as Bitbucket. Or in Visual Studio Online, our default format is Git. So we don't use TFS format for the items, we use Git. So when we use variety of different sources and variety of different repositories, right? Challenge is how you maintain those repositories. And I personally am not a big fan of Visual Studio user interface, though it does have the advantage where you can associate work items with the commits. So if you're using Visual Studio, the built-in interface is sort of more or less okay, but then you start missing on the other repositories. The tool that I found absolutely invaluable is called Source Tree, and it's a free tool from Atlassian. You know, Atlassian is maker of Jira and some other tools, but this tool is from them. It's called Source Tree. It's free of charge, and it's capable of working across multiple repositories. And it's particularly useful when you start bringing people to your team who had previously very limited exposure to the distributed control system, version control systems, and they have a learning curve they have to learn all the intricacies of using Git command line or Mercurial command line, which could be intimidating. So this tool makes it really easy just to hit the ground running, start using it day in, day out, branching, merging, all this sort of stuff. It's built in. It's really easy to use. So I strongly recommend to anyone who uses more than one repository to have, or even with one repository, have a look at this tool, because it's just great.
Do you have to use the other Atlassian tools with the Confluence
No,
and Jira?
no, absolutely not. It's completely independent, and you just point it to repositories and start working. So it's independent of any other tool. Yes, but
I'm not a fan of Jira. I'm not a Jira.
No, forget about Jira. You don't have to use Jira. I'm not a big fan of Jira either. But we do use Bitbucket, which was bought by Atlassian some time ago. And we have a paid account, say, with Bitbucket. But I thought there would be some kind of promotion of Bitbucket, over Git. No, nothing like that. I don't see any specific preferences given to any given format. What's interesting is that out of the box, it's got ability to, follow the specific branching and format, or it has the button which is called Git flow, and the Git flow is a particular way to structure your projects where you branch and merge back quite frequently, so giving each developer an independent room to work in. So to my surprise, no, it's not linked to any of the Atlassian products whatsoever, and it's a good tool. Just have a look and decide for yourself if it suits your needs. But it certainly works for us.
All right, send me a link to where we get it, and I'll put it in the show notes on the post.
Absolutely, I'll drop you a link where you can get it, and I'll just do a quick search, and of course it's source3app.com.
Okay.
Very nice.
Oh, it works on Mac as well, so I didn't realize that. Not that
Even better.
Care, but speaking of Mac, I set up a challenge last week. You know how Surface Book actually looks cool?
Looks awesome.
It looks awesome. But my question was it looks better than the Mac, right? And we know developers using Macs because they look awesome to run Windows. Now, my challenge is, can anyone make Mac OS X to run on Surface Book?
You can dual boot it.
No, not dual boot.
Oh, you want it just to run.
I would suspect that would be fairly difficult. Like the Hackintosh stuff is all using kind of generic components, where this probably has stuff that is specifically made for Surface Book. So I'm sure somebody could try it.
I bet you the one thing you would run into is you wouldn't be able to use the trackpad. Like it would run, but you couldn't use the mouse. Something like that would happen.
Are you going to get a Surface Book, George?
Yes. Yep. It's I just hate the queuing and all sort of stuff. So and the shipment was available, but it's gonna be shipped when I'm gonna be in US. So I kind of decided to wait it out a bit, and probably we'll get one in December or something like that. But I was
pricing them out, and of course they have the $14.99 price, which is for the i5 version that you probably don't really want. But you get up to the one you want, it jumps up to like $2,600 or $3,000.
Yeah.
So it jumps up really fast.
I heard on a gaming podcast they were talking about the Surface Book, in that like a lot of gamers are looking at that as a gaming laptop because of the specs. $2,600, that's a little too much for my blood, but maybe the $1,400 one, maybe next year.
Right.
Before the Surface Book 2.
As somebody who has purchased the original Microsoft Band, the original Surface Pro, and the original Zune HD, I have sworn off buying the first release of any Microsoft hardware product.
Yeah, I've done the same except for the Microsoft Band. I almost pulled that trigger. But
I've got my eye on the Surface Pro 4, so I'm thinking of getting one of those.
It's kind of doesn't do it for me because again Surface Pro 3 edges. It's going to be a bit faster, but doesn't do it for me. I mean, Surface Book, on the other hand, solves my issue with my gripes that I have with Surface 3. So that is, more than once I picked my Surface by keyboard, and you know what happens next, right?
Yes.
I've been lucky not to claim my insurance so far.
All right, well, gentlemen, this brings us to the end of episode 12. Wish you all safety as you're trick-or-treating, and make sure you check your candy first.
That's right. And make sure you don't stop at Mark Benioff's house. He's just giving away Salesforce trial subscriptions. It's not worth it.
And Joe, I'll see you next week.
Yes, see you at the summit.
Absolutely.
This has been CRM Audio, the Microsoft Dynamics CRM podcast. You can hear previous episodes on our website, crm.audio. Subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, follow us on Twitter at CRM Audio, or leave us a comment on our Facebook page, facebook.com/CRM podcast. If you have any topic suggestions or questions that you would like for us to answer on a future episode, please drop us an email at voice@crm.audio. Special thanks to Dale Simmons for our theme music. Go check out his website, dalesimmons.com. Please join us next time on CRM Audio.